The massive chamber stretched out like a metallic canyon with walls that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Ambassador Lisa Grant sat perfectly still in her assigned chair, watching the alien delegates argue among themselves as if humans were not even present in the room. For 3 long months she had endured their condescending speeches and dismissive gestures, each word carefully chosen to remind her species of their supposed inferiority. The Zephyrian High Consul raised his elongated, blue arm, demanding silence from the other delegates. His voice carried the weight of centuries as he spoke down to the human delegation with barely concealed disgust. The latest proposal lay before them on crystalline tablets that glowed with alien script, but Lisa had already memorized every insulting detail. Humanity must surrender all weapons technology immediately. They must submit to protective custody on designated worlds far from galactic civilization. They must accept permanent junior status under alien oversight, never to advance beyond their current primitive state. Captain John Hayes stood motionless in the observation deck above, his military uniform crisp despite the months of diplomatic torture they had all endured. His job was to watch and learn, to catalog every alien gesture and weakness for future reference. The condescending chittering of the Vex collective representatives grated against his nerves like metal scraping stone, but his face remained stone cold. He had seen combat across a dozen worlds, but nothing had prepared him for the slow burn of diplomatic humiliation. Dr. Amy Watson sat 3 seats down from Lisa, her datapad recording everything with meticulous precision. To the aliens she appeared to be taking simple notes, but her real work involved mapping the behavioral patterns and biological tells of every species in the chamber. The Krillians flexed their neck spines when lying. The Vex buzzed at higher frequencies when nervous. The Zephyrians leaked stress pheromones through their skin when angry. All of this information would prove valuable in the days to come. General Thaxgar of the Krillian Empire made a show of activating his bioscanner, letting it sweep across the human delegation with obvious satisfaction. He announced loudly that his readings showed elevated stress hormones and fear pheromones radiating from the humans, as if their terror proved the righteousness of alien demands. The other delegates laughed and clicked and buzzed their approval at this public humiliation. They could not detect the cold determination that burned beneath the surface of every human present. Lisa Grant had been born on Earth during the first years of human space exploration, when their species still believed the galaxy would welcome them with open arms. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment, studying alien languages and customs, dreaming of the day when humanity would take its place among the stars as equals. Instead, she found herself trapped in a chamber full of beings who viewed her people as dangerous children in need of permanent supervision. The Zephyrian High Consul continued his speech, outlining the many ways in which human aggression threatened galactic peace. He spoke of human unpredictability and their disturbing tendency to find violent solutions to complex problems. He painted them as a species too primitive for true civilization, too dangerous to be allowed technological advancement. The other delegates nodded their agreement while making notes about which human colonies they would claim once the subjugation was complete. Captain Hayes watched it all from above, his tactical mind already planning for contingencies the aliens could not imagine. They saw human military officers as crude warriors wielding primitive weapons, but they failed to understand that human warfare was about adaptation and innovation. Every slight and insult was being cataloged for future reference. Every weakness and blind spot was being noted and filed away. The aliens thought they were delivering ultimatums to a defeated species, but they were actually providing intelligence to their future conquerors. Dr. Watson activated a small device hidden in her sleeve, one that began broadcasting on frequencies the aliens could not detect. The message was simple but vital, carrying detailed intelligence about every species present back to human space through quantum entanglement networks. Within hours, teams of analysts on Earth would have complete breakdowns of alien military capabilities, political structures, and most importantly, their fatal overconfidence. The session dragged on for hours as alien after alien stood to denounce human aggression and demand immediate compliance with their terms. They spoke of human wars and conflicts as if their own species had never known violence, conveniently ignoring the fact that they had spent millennia suppressing younger civilizations through fear and intimidation. They painted themselves as peaceful protectors while describing in detail how they would hunt down any humans who dared to resist their benevolent rule. Lisa Grant listened to every word while her mind raced through possibilities and probabilities. She had access to human intelligence networks that painted a very different picture of galactic civilization than the one being presented in this chamber. The mighty Galactic Council was actually a fragile alliance held together by mutual fear and economic dependence. Their military forces were largely ceremonial, designed more for parade displays than actual combat. They had grown soft and complacent after centuries of unchallenged dominance. The final speaker was a representative of the Neural Collective, a species that communicated through direct mind-to-mind contact. When she spoke aloud, her words carried an eerie harmonic quality that made human skin crawl. She demanded that humans submit to neural monitoring to ensure they could never again threaten galactic peace. The idea of alien minds prowling through human thoughts was perhaps the most insulting demand yet made. As the last echoes of alien demands faded away, Lisa Grant slowly pushed back her chair and stood. The chamber fell silent as every alien eye turned toward her. For 3 months they had lectured and threatened and demanded, always expecting human submission in return. Now they would hear humanity's final answer. Her words were calm and measured, delivered with the dignity of someone representing an entire species. The United Earth Federation respectfully declined this proposal and all previous ultimatums. Humanity was withdrawing from these proceedings effective immediately. There would be no surrender, no submission, no acceptance of alien oversight. The alien delegates reacted with a mixture of relief and smugness, as if her words confirmed their suspicions about human stupidity. They expected the humans to return home in defeat, to gradually fade into irrelevance as their technology stagnated and their colonies withered. What they did not expect was the cold smile that touched Lisa Grant's lips as she placed a small data pad on the conference table. The device contained detailed intelligence about every species present, their military capabilities, political weaknesses, and most importantly, proof that they had been systematically sabotaging human development for decades. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, the aliens congratulated themselves on avoiding a war they were certain they would have won. They had no idea that the war had already begun. 6 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and the silence from human space was becoming deafening. Trade ships that ventured toward human colonies reported empty stations floating in the void, like ghost ships. Communication arrays that once buzzed with human chatter now transmitted nothing but static. The few human vessels encountered in neutral space refused all contact, jumping to hyperspace the moment alien ships appeared on their sensors. Commander Rickstone stood on the bridge of the evacuation vessel looking out at Titan Base, humanity's largest military installation outside the Sol system. The massive structure had taken 20 years to build, and now it would be gone within hours. His crews worked with mechanical precision, stripping every piece of useful technology from the station before the final demolition charges were set. To any alien observers, it would appear that humanity was retreating in defeat, abandoning their greatest achievements in the face of superior force. The reality was far different from what it seemed. Every component removed from Titan Base was being carefully cataloged and transported to hidden facilities throughout human space. The aliens had spent months studying human technology through diplomatic exchanges, never realizing that humans had been doing the same thing to them. Every alien device that had passed through human hands had been scanned, analyzed, and reverse-engineered in secret laboratories scattered across a dozen worlds. Engineer Kate Miller supervised the demolition teams as they worked their way through the outer sections of the base. Her job was to ensure that nothing of value fell into alien hands, but more importantly, to make sure the destruction looked authentic. The aliens expected human desperation and panic, so she gave them exactly what they wanted to see. Explosions rocked the station in seemingly random patterns while escape pods launched in all directions. Carrying precious cargo, disguised as panicked refugees, the alien intelligence networks were reporting exactly what their masters wanted to hear. Human colonies were suffering economic collapse without access to galactic trade routes. Food shipments were being rationed and industrial production was grinding to a halt. Several worlds were reportedly considering surrender to avoid starvation. The reports painted a picture of a species slowly dying in isolation, exactly as the Galactic Council had predicted. What the aliens failed to understand was that humans had been preparing for this possibility since their first contact with galactic civilization. Hidden stockpiles of food and resources had been quietly accumulated over decades. Secret research facilities had been developing alternatives to alien technology. Most importantly, human agents had been cataloging every weakness and vulnerability in the galactic power structure, waiting for the right moment to act. On Earth, Professor Alex Turner worked around the clock in laboratories that officially did not exist. The alien technology samples acquired through diplomatic channels were being dissected with a fury born of righteous anger. The condescending attitude of the galactic powers had provided unexpected motivation for human scientists who now understood. They were fighting for the survival of their entire species. Every circuit and component was being studied, improved, and weaponized. The breakthrough came when Turner's team discovered that alien technology was based on standardized protocols that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. The galactic powers had grown so comfortable with their dominance that they had stopped innovating entirely. Their weapons, shields, and communication systems all operated on frequencies and algorithms that could be predicted and countered once humans understood the underlying principles. Agent Maria Lopez had spent the last 4 months aboard an alien freighter, her identity hidden behind forged documentation and cosmetic surgery. Her mission was to gather intelligence about alien trade routes and military installations. But what she discovered was far more valuable. The mighty Galactic Council was actually a house of cards held together by fear and tradition. Their military forces had not fought a real war in over a millennium, and their officers were more concerned with ceremony than combat readiness. The Zephyrian patrol fleets that dominated the Outer Rim were impressive to look at but poorly maintained underneath their gleaming hulls. The Krillian Empire's vaunted battle cruisers were designed more for intimidation than actual fighting. The Vex collective swarm tactics relied on overwhelming numbers of cheap drones that could be easily countered with the right countermeasures. Every species in the Galactic Council had grown soft and complacent, believing their own propaganda about invincibility. Dr. Carl Brooks operated from a mobile laboratory ship that jumped between star systems, never staying in one place long enough to be detected. His work involved intercepting alien communications and breaking their encryption codes. What he found painted a disturbing picture of galactic society. The Council maintained power through a combination of technological superiority and economic control. But both pillars were weaker than they appeared. The alien races communicated using quantum entanglement, networks that they believed were unbreakable. But human mathematicians had already developed theoretical models for intercepting such signals. More importantly, the aliens had grown careless with their communications security. Discussing sensitive military and political matters on channels they assumed no primitive species could access. Agent Peter Kim worked deep in Krillian territory, posing as a maintenance worker on orbital defense platforms. His reports revealed shocking truths about the Empire's military capabilities. The massive weapons arrays that protected their homeworlds were largely automated systems, running on software that had not been updated in centuries. The Krillian officers who commanded these installations were bureaucrats rather than warriors, more concerned with filing reports than maintaining combat readiness. The galactic economy depended heavily on a few critical choke points that controlled the flow of resources between star systems. Captain Susan Brooks commanded a stealth reconnaissance vessel that mapped every major trade route and communication relay. Her crew discovered that the entire galactic infrastructure was built around the assumption that no one would dare challenge the established order. A sufficiently motivated force could easily disrupt the flow of goods and information that kept the galaxy running. The aliens began to notice strange incidents throughout their territory. Sensor ghosts appeared and disappeared without explanation. Communication relays experienced mysterious failures that lasted just long enough to disrupt important transmissions. Automated defense platforms occasionally reported system malfunctions that reset their targeting parameters. The alien engineers attributed these problems to equipment aging and cosmic interference, never suspecting that invisible human agents were testing their defenses. Meanwhile, the reports of human suffering continued to flow through alien intelligence. Networks, starvation on the outer colonies, industrial collapse on the core worlds, political chaos as human governments struggled to maintain order without galactic support. The aliens congratulated themselves on avoiding a costly war while watching their enemies slowly destroy themselves through isolation. What they did not realize was that humanity had not collapsed but had instead gone underground. The greatest intelligence operation in human history was taking place right under their noses, gathering the information that would soon turn the galaxy upside down. The silence from human space was not the sound of defeat but the quiet before the storm. General Paul Adams stood in the command center of a hidden base carved deep into an asteroid beyond Proxima Centauri, watching as intelligence reports flowed in from across the galaxy. For over a year now, human agents had been working in the shadows, gathering information that painted a very different picture of galactic civilization than what the Galactic Council wanted the universe to believe. The truth was both more disturbing and more encouraging than anyone had expected. The real reason behind the Council's ultimatum was becoming clear through intercepted communications and stolen documents. The alien powers were not trying to protect the galaxy from human aggression, but rather protecting themselves from human potential. Internal memos spoke of the alarming rate of human technological advancement and their disturbing tendency to find innovative solutions to impossible problems. The aliens feared that humanity's example might inspire other species to question the established order. Agent Maria Lopez had spent months infiltrating Zephyrian space aboard merchant vessels, gathering intelligence that shattered the myth of alien superiority. Her latest report detailed the discovery of suppression protocols that had been active for centuries. The Galactic Council had been systematically sabotaging the development of younger species, ensuring they remained primitive enough to control. Promising civilizations had been destroyed through engineered plagues, resource shortages, and civil wars orchestrated from the shadows. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying in its scope. The peaceful, benevolent galactic civilization was actually a carefully maintained prison designed to keep potential rivals from threatening the established hierarchy. Humanity's rapid advancement despite these sabotage efforts had terrified the Council into taking direct action. They could not allow humans to continue developing independently, knowing that other species might follow their example. Dr. Carl Brooks operated from his mobile laboratory ship, decoding alien communications with equipment that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. His breakthrough came when he realized that the aliens had grown so confident in their technological superiority that they barely bothered to encrypt their most sensitive transmissions. Military deployment schedules, resource allocation reports, and political strategy documents all flowed through communication networks that assumed no primitive species could access them. The intelligence painted a picture of a galactic society built on lies and maintained through fear. The mighty Krillian Empire was actually struggling with internal rebellions on a dozen worlds. The Vex Collective was facing economic collapse as their resource extraction operations became increasingly inefficient. The Zephyrian Republic was dealing with a growing independence movement among their client species. Every member of the Galactic Council was facing serious internal problems that they desperately tried to hide from each other. Agent Peter Kim had managed to penetrate the highest levels of Krillian military command by posing as a systems analyst. His access to classified databases revealed that the Empire's military strength was largely ceremonial. Their officers were politicians, rather than warriors, more concerned with advancement through the bureaucracy than actual combat readiness. The mighty battle fleets that patrolled the galaxy were impressive to look at, but poorly trained and equipped with outdated weapon systems. Captain Susan Brooks commanded a stealth reconnaissance vessel that had been mapping alien infrastructure for months. Her crew discovered that the galactic economy depended on a few critical transportation hubs and communication relays. The entire system was designed around the assumption that no one would dare challenge the established order. A coordinated attack on these choke points could paralyze the galaxy within weeks. The most shocking discovery came from Agent Robert Taylor, who had infiltrated the Council's historical archives on the neutral world of Kepler Station. The records revealed that the current galactic order was built on the ruins of dozens of promising civilizations that had been destroyed when they showed signs of technological independence. Species after species had been crushed just as they reached the threshold of true spacefaring capability, their potential snuffed out to maintain the balance of power. Dr. Amy Watson had been analyzing biological samples collected by human agents throughout the galaxy. Her research revealed that several of the Council species were actually showing signs of genetic stagnation after millennia of technological dependence. They had become so reliant on their ancient technologies that they had lost the ability to innovate or adapt. Their supposed superiority was actually a weakness that could be exploited by a species still capable of growth and change. The intelligence operation had uncovered something even more valuable than military secrets or economic vulnerabilities. Hidden throughout the galaxy were younger species that had been watching humanity's defiant stand with growing admiration. These civilizations had been suppressed for so long that they had almost forgotten the possibility of resistance. But human actions were inspiring them to reconsider their situation. Agent Lisa Chun had made contact with several of these groups, carefully building networks of communication and mutual support. The Tausetians had developed advanced biotechnology in secret despite Council restrictions. The Rigel Confederacy possessed unique manufacturing capabilities that they had been forced to hide. The Volfpack Alliance had maintained military traditions, despite being officially disarmed centuries ago. Each of these species represented potential allies in a future conflict with the Council. The reports flowing into General Adams' command center painted a picture of galactic civilization that was far more fragile than it appeared. The Council maintained power through a combination of technological superiority, economic control, and psychological intimidation, but all three pillars were showing signs of weakness. More importantly, the foundation of their power was built on the assumption that no one would ever challenge them directly. Human agents had also discovered the location of the Council's most sensitive facilities, research stations where captured alien technologies were studied and improved, military bases where new weapon systems were tested, communication hubs that coordinated activities across the galaxy, prison worlds where dissidents and rebels were held in permanent exile. All of these targets had been mapped, analyzed, and marked for future action. The aliens continued to congratulate themselves on avoiding a costly war while monitoring the apparent collapse of human civilization. Their intelligence networks reported widespread starvation, industrial failure, and political chaos throughout human space. What they did not realize was that these reports were carefully crafted deceptions designed to maintain the illusion of human weakness while the real preparation continued in secret. Dr. Helen Carter had been leading teams of scientists in developing new technologies based on captured alien systems. The breakthrough discoveries were staggering in their implications. Human engineers had not only matched alien capabilities but had begun surpassing them in key areas. The adaptive systems they developed could learn and counter alien defensive measures in real time, turning the enemy's own technology against them. As the intelligence operation entered its final phase, General Adams knew that humanity was ready for the next step. They had gathered enough information to understand their enemies completely while remaining hidden from alien detection. The galaxy believed that humans had been broken by isolation and defeat, but the reality was that they had used this time to become something far more dangerous than the aliens had ever imagined. The Watchers had become the Watched, and soon the galaxy would learn that humanity had never truly left the table, but had instead been building a much larger one. 2 years after the human delegation walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, humanity announced its return to the galaxy in a way that no one could ignore. It began with small incidents that seemed unrelated at first. Alien cargo convoys started disappearing between star systems, their automated distress signals cutting off mid-transmission. Communication relays that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly went dark, leaving entire sectors isolated from the galactic network. Defense platforms protecting important worlds began experiencing system failures at the worst possible moments. The Zephyrian High Command initially dismissed these incidents as random equipment failures or pirate attacks, but the pattern became impossible to ignore when 12 major incidents occurred simultaneously across different sectors of the galaxy. Trade routes that formed the backbone of galactic commerce were disrupted by mysterious sensor ghosts that appeared and vanished without explanation. Military patrols reported brief contacts with unknown vessels that seemed to phase in and out of reality like phantoms. Admiral Jack Peterson stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty as his fleet prepared to decloak in the Kepler system, one of 12 strategic locations where human vessels would reveal themselves simultaneously. The ships under his command bore little resemblance to the crewed vessels that had departed Council space 2 years earlier. Sleek, predatory designs incorporated the best of human engineering with captured alien technology, creating something entirely new and terrifying to behold. The moment of revelation came at precisely 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time. Across 12 star systems, human fleets materialized out of seemingly empty space as their advanced stealth systems powered down. The sight that greeted alien sensors was unlike anything they had encountered in millennia of galactic dominance. These were not the desperate refugees they expected, but the ships of a military force that had evolved beyond their comprehension. Commander Nicole White led the first diplomatic vessel to approach the emergency council session that had been hastily convened on the neutral station at Vega Prime. Her message was broadcast on all frequencies in every known alien language, ensuring that no one could claim ignorance of humanity's return. The transmission was simple and direct, requesting a new diplomatic session to discuss revised terms of engagement between humanity and the galactic community. The aliens had little choice but to agree to the meeting, though their response came only after hours of frantic communication between council members. The human fleet had demonstrated capabilities that defied everything they thought they knew about primitive human technology. Sensors could barely track the human vessels, and attempts to scan their hulls revealed adaptive shielding that seemed to learn and evolve in real time. Engineer Tim Foster had spent 2 years perfecting the technological marvel that made human superiority possible. The adaptive systems installed on every human ship could analyze alien technology and develop countermeasures within minutes of first contact. When Krillian vessels attempted to scan the human fleet, their sensors were not only blocked but actually turned against them, providing the humans with detailed intelligence about Krillian military capabilities. The demonstration of human technological advancement continued as the diplomatic vessel approached Vega Prime. Station security systems that should have provided detailed scans of incoming ships instead found themselves locked out of their own networks. Communication arrays meant to monitor all transmissions suddenly began broadcasting human messages across the galaxy. The aliens realized with growing horror that their most advanced technology was being controlled by the supposedly primitive humans. Dr. Helen Carter had traded her civilian clothes for the uniform of the newly formed Human Space Command, and she now stood before the hastily assembled alien delegates with data that left them speechless. Humanity had not only matched their technology but had surpassed it in several critical areas. The presentation included detailed breakdowns of alien defense systems, complete with instructions on how to bypass or disable them. The most shocking revelation came when Dr. Carter displayed the results of human innovation during their 2 years of isolation. Weapon systems that could adapt to any shielding technology. sensors that could track vessels through hyperspace itself, manufacturing techniques that could produce complex components in hours rather than the months required by alien methods. Every breakthrough was a direct result of reverse engineering alien technology and then improving upon it. Agent Robert Taylor took the stage next, presenting evidence that silenced the chamber completely. His data proved beyond doubt that the Galactic Council had been systematically sabotaging human development for decades through engineered disasters, resource manipulation, and covert military actions. The evidence included intercepted communications, financial records, and even video footage of Council agents directing attacks on human colonies. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as the scope of their crimes was laid bare before the galaxy. Species after species had been destroyed or suppressed to maintain the Council's power, but humanity had survived and thrived despite their best efforts. The humans had not only uncovered these crimes but had used the knowledge to forge alliances with other oppressed civilizations throughout the galaxy. General Paul Adams addressed the assembly wearing the insignia of Supreme Commander of Human Forces, a position that had not existed when humans first approached the Council seeking peaceful cooperation. His words carried the weight of a species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point and had emerged stronger than anyone thought possible. The terms he presented were not requests but ultimatums backed by overwhelming military force. Full recognition of humanity as a sovereign galactic power was non-negotiable. Reparations for decades of covert interference would be paid in technology and resources. Most importantly, humanity would assume the role of protector for developing civilizations, ensuring that no species would again suffer the suppression. That had been the galaxy's dark secret for millennia. The Council members, who had once dismissed humans as primitive barbarians, now faced representatives of a civilization that had evolved beyond their understanding. The humans did not seek conquest or revenge, but rather the establishment of a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. The choice they offered was simple: cooperation or irrelevance. Captain Steve Ross commanded the garrison fleet that had already established permanent bases throughout the galaxy while the diplomatic session was taking place. These were not invasion forces but liberation armies positioned to protect younger species from Council retaliation. The message was clear: the age of galactic tyranny was ending whether the Council agreed or not. As the session concluded, Admiral Peterson transmitted the final human statement to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had not returned to beg for scraps at the alien table, but to build something better. The species that had been dismissed as too primitive for galactic civilization was now offering to lead it into a new age of freedom and cooperation. The galaxy that had looked on in satisfaction as humans left the table 2 years earlier now watched in fear as they returned with the power to flip that table entirely. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The second diplomatic summit took place aboard the human flagship Victory, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest alien dreadnoughts in both size and technological sophistication. Ambassador Lisa Grant had returned to the negotiating table, but she no longer carried the simple title of diplomatic representative. The insignia on her uniform marked her as Sector Admiral of the Human Liberation Fleet, and the aliens who had once dismissed her now sat across from her as supplicants rather than masters. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that the alien delegates seemed lost in their new reality. The Zephyrian High Consul, who had once lectured humans about their primitive nature, now struggled to maintain eye contact with Admiral Grant. The Krillian general, who had mocked human fear pheromones, sat rigid in his chair, his own stress markers clearly visible to the advanced sensors that monitored every aspect of the meeting. The terms that humanity presented were not open for negotiation, and Admiral Grant made this clear from the moment the session began. Full recognition of humanity as a sovereign galactic power had already been achieved through demonstration rather than diplomacy. The alien fleets that had once patrolled the galaxy with impunity now found themselves outmatched by human vessels that seemed to bend the laws of physics to their will. Reparations for decades of covert Interference would be paid through a combination of technology transfers and resource allocations. The aliens would provide detailed specifications for their most advanced systems, while also granting humanity access to rare materials that had been restricted from human space. More importantly, they would provide complete records of all suppression operations conducted against developing civilizations throughout galactic history. Captain Steve Ross had already begun implementing the most significant change in galactic politics since the Council's formation. Human garrison fleets were establishing permanent bases throughout the galaxy, but these were not conquest forces designed to replace one tyranny with another. Instead, they served as liberation armies positioned to protect younger species from the predatory practices that had maintained Council power for millennia. The transformation was already visible on dozens of worlds where human forces had arrived to find civilizations struggling under the weight of artificial limitations imposed by their supposed protectors. The Tausetians had been forced to abandon biotechnology research that could have solved their population crisis. The Rigel Confederacy had seen their manufacturing capabilities deliberately sabotaged to prevent economic independence. The Volf Pack Alliance had been disarmed and scattered across multiple worlds to prevent unified resistance. Dr. Rachel Green led the new Galactic Development Initiative, an organization dedicated to sharing human knowledge and technology with species, ready to break free from Council dominance. Her teams worked alongside alien scientists, who had spent centuries believing that certain technologies were beyond their capability, only to discover that the limitations were artificial rather than natural. The transformation was not limited to military or technological changes, but extended to the very foundation of galactic society. Young species that had been told they were too primitive for self-governance suddenly found themselves with powerful allies willing to challenge the established hierarchy. Independence movements that had been suppressed for generations began emerging on worlds throughout the galaxy. The Council members who had once ruled through fear and intimidation now faced the prospect of becoming irrelevant in their own galaxy. Their military forces were being systematically dismantled not through conquest but through obsolescence. Human technology had advanced so far beyond their capabilities that resistance was not just futile but pointless. General Don Clark oversaw the decommissioning of the Galactic Council's enforcement fleets, massive vessels that had terrorized developing worlds for thousands of years. The process was conducted with clinical efficiency as human engineers stripped away weapon systems and converted the ships into research vessels and colony transports. The symbols of galactic oppression were being transformed into tools of exploration and cooperation. The most significant moment came when Admiral Grant addressed a gathering that would have been impossible under the old system. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the massive assembly hall aboard the Victory, including delegates from species that had never been allowed to speak in council chambers. Young civilizations that had been dismissed as too primitive now sat alongside ancient species that had been marginalized for questioning council authority. The sight was breathtaking in its implications. Beings from across the galaxy who had lived under the shadow of council dominance for millennia were finally free to speak their minds and pursue their own destinies. The diversity of thought and innovation that had been suppressed by the old system was now being unleashed on a scale that promised to revolutionize galactic civilization. Dr. Amy Watson presented the biological and cultural research that had been conducted during humanity's 2 years of preparation. The data showed that forced technological dependence had actually caused genetic and cultural stagnation among several council species. They had become so reliant on ancient technologies and rigid social structures that they had lost the ability to adapt and evolve. The evidence painted a disturbing picture of what the galaxy might have become if the Council had succeeded in suppressing humanity. A stagnant civilization ruled by increasingly desperate tyrants, who maintained power through the systematic destruction of anything that threatened their control. The potential for growth and discovery that made life worth living would have been sacrificed on the altar of political stability. Agent Maria Lopez had spent months documenting the extent of Council crimes throughout the galaxy, and her final report contained evidence of atrocities that shocked even the human leadership. Entire species had been driven to extinction not through war or natural disaster, but through carefully orchestrated campaigns of cultural and technological suppression. The Council had been systematically murdering the future itself. The session concluded with Admiral Grant delivering words that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had not left the alien table to sulk in defeat or seek revenge for past wrongs. They had left to build something better, something that had room for every species willing to embrace cooperation over domination, the new galactic order that emerged from the ashes of Council tyranny was based on principles that the old rulers could never have understood. Strength came not from keeping others down but from lifting them up. Security was achieved not through fear but through mutual respect and cooperation. Progress was measured not by the accumulation of power but by the advancement of all civilizations. The galaxy that had once looked on in fear as humans left the table now watched in wonder as humanity invited everyone to join them at a much larger one. The age of artificial scarcity and engineered conflict was ending, replaced by an era of exploration and discovery that promised to unlock the full potential of galactic civilization. As the last Council enforcement vessel was converted to peaceful purposes and the final suppression protocols were dismantled, the galaxy began to glimpse what it could become when every species was free to contribute their unique gifts to the greater whole. The humans who had been dismissed as too primitive for civilization had instead shown the galaxy what true civilization could look like.